Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.
The Sparkfile podcast may contain profanity and other adult content.
Please use your discretion.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Welcome to the Spark File, your one-stop 3-car garage for creative inspiration.
I'm Laura Camion.
And I'm Susan Blackwell. If you're joining us for the 50 millionth time, welcome back. If you're joining us for the first time, welcome. You may be asking yourself, what is a Spark File? Where do I get one? What do I file in it? These are such good questions. We actually have answers.
We do. A Spark File is a place where you consistently collect all of your inspirations and fascinations.
Melissa, what has to do? We are makers and we make all kinds of things.
If you're like us and you're making stuff all the time, or you want to be making stuff all the time, you know the wellspring of inspiration can run a little dry.
So we're on the lookout for fresh ideas, images, and inspiration that spark our creativity and pique our curiosity, things that inspire us to get up off of our asses and make things like this podcast.
Or a perfectly planned lazy afternoon.
I love the sound of that spark. Or a commitment to making it all look absolutely effortless.
Ooh, every episode we're going to reach into the Spark File and exchange some sparks. And from time to time, we're going to talk to some folks who spark us too.
And if you're not careful, you might work harder than you ever have in your life.
Ooh.
So without further ado, let's open up
the Spark File.
Camion, I have a weird feeling that your spark and my spark, this, I could be wrong.
They might kiss.
Be the perfect companion pieces.
I don't know.
A yin and a yang.
You think?
A black and white cookie.
Oh my gosh. It could happen.
I could be wrong. I've been wrong so many
times
before.
These things are completely unplanned, folks, just so you know. We never know what we're sharing. So sometimes we have a little bit of a fear of like, oh my God, do you have the same spark as me? Or do we have contrary sparks?
Or is there Venn diagram spark overlap?
We
might have, I could be wrong, but just based on what you just said and what I know I'm about to say to you.
My little tease.
I can't stop thinking about your spark about Colonel Fawcett and the Amazon. Here's a spark. I don't know if this is a song. I don't know if it's a short story. I don't know if it's a film. I don't know if it's a play. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's a poem. What if there's a story from the point of view of people that were on these exploring expeditions, not Fawcett, but say 2 of those men that were on the exploring expedition, and they had the rule, which is if you fall,
if you get sick,
you get left behind. But what if 2 of the people on that expedition two men were in love with each other and they had to make the hard choice about if the rule still stands.
In 1925.
In 1925.
Like so
and it was all
a dangerous danger upon danger upon danger.
Yes, in the Amazon.
I think that is so incredible. And I've been thinking too about David Gann saying, this he brought his son, his 21-year-old son, that you have to believe he had hopes and dreams for his son, and his son had them too, that he would go on and be a famous explorer himself and other things. And how did it feel to lead his son to his death? Does the abandonment rule apply
when it's your son?
Also, was he prepared to leave his son behind?
Yeah, but he may not. I don't know. If you're doing that kind of work, I have to believe that you are not unbeatable, but maybe close to it, that you have some confidence.
Remember, like, he's deep, deep, deep into the jungle, and his last dispatch to his wife is, in about a month, we should get there, and don't you worry, we're not going to fail.
Confident.
Totally confident.
What a world-class spark that was.
Hey, thanks.
Really good. Do you want to hear a fresh spark?
Oh, I totally do.
Is there anything else you want to say before we rock this spark?
I want to hear your spark.
Here we go. My spark is entitled, Pack Your Bags for Your Trip and Leave Them at the Door. My spark sources are Cheer on Netflix, a piece on vulture.com by David Marchese. I'm not sure how to pronounce your name, David, but you're a hell of an interviewer and a great writer. A piece in Vanity Fair by Ian Crouch, and another Vanity Fair piece by David Camp. A Beyonce documentary or two. A documentary called Momentum Generation. You know what? Let's just get into it.
You did some research.
I did. Camion.
Yeah.
Have you seen the documentary series Cheer on Netflix? No,
I have it queued up to go.
Okay.
I just need some TV time and I'm desperate for it.
I initially heard about it from our friend of the podcast, Laura Coward. And I was like, I was a high school cheerleader. I'll take this ride. I want to watch this. I'm curious. And I have to tell you, I really loved this documentary series. In case you're unfamiliar, Cheer is a Netflix documentary series that follows an award-winning Navarro College cheer squad from Corsicana, Texas. According to their website, the Navarro College cheer team, under the direction of head coach Monica Aldama, has won 14 national championships since 2000 and claimed its fifth NCAA Grand National Championship since 2012. So they are a extremely successful cheer team. You don't really see this on the documentary series, but this team also cheers for Navarro College at all the home football, men's basketball, and women's volleyball games. That's on their website, but you don't really see a lot of that in the documentary series.
What do you see in the documentary? Just them training?
What the filmmakers really focus on is practice. Their practice. In fact, it's hard for me to comprehend how they have time for all their classes, homework, all those home games. And that's maybe a game every other week or every week. It's bonkers because these cheerleaders practice a lot. And at the peak of their fatigue, their coach, Monica Aldama, has them practice more in order to condition them and build up their strength and stamina. So when they've just done, say, like they've done a run through or a tumbling pass or whatever, she's like, okay, now like keep going while you're in that like state, like keep going.
Push it.
Cams, I feel like things have changed since you and I were high school cheerleaders. I used to
that might be the understatement of the year.
I used to keep up with, they had the high school cheerleading championships on ESPN2. And I remember watching them, and then all of a sudden I remember not watching. I've gone long periods with not really being keyed into high school or college cheerleading, frankly. And I think it's because the National Cheerleading Association has basically, it's not on ESPN anymore. it's sort of they film it. It's their product.
They want to make the money.
They want to make the money off of it. I have a feeling they wouldn't even, spoiler, they wouldn't allow Netflix to film at the National Cheerleading Championship.
Wow.
Yeah. So they have a tight hold on it.
What a loss for them, because
I think it's going to change. I think that this spotlight that that Netflix and this documentary series Cheer have brought back onto the sport, I think we're going to see a renaissance in college and high school cheerleading.
Well, you mean they may break it open and let the general public see it.
I think we're going to see more of it on different platforms.
Because I would guess that they have a robust following and they get all that money directly, which they're happier with than having the deal with ESPN.
But there's so many, people don't just cheer for schools anymore. There are private cheerleading clubs. There's so many.
Plus, there's just general fans. Like, we're not going to cheer anymore, but we might watch those competitions.
Yeah, I just think
the show is going to
bust it wide open.
That,
The thing that I was about to say is things have really changed since you and I are cheerleaders, and they are doing things now that I could not believe it when I saw it on Cheer. I had never seen it before. And I couldn't believe what I was seeing.
Like, that's real, like, choreography. Like original work that surprises the shit out of you.
But also, there's a thing, I don't know when this thing happened, or it's like, who was the first person to eat a tomato? Who was the first person to take a risk that it might be poisonous? It might not be poisonous. Who was the first person that took that risk? I want to know who the first person was that innovated this stunt they're doing now, where they essentially, if you can picture it, picture a man standing. Picture a woman sitting on that man's shoulders, for instance, or standing on his upstretched hands.
Oh my God.
Now picture a woman flying through the air, sort of in a mid-air cartwheel, and landing on top of that woman's shoulders, like somehow aiming her body / her crotch so that it lands on that woman's shoulders. I'd never seen anything like it. I could not. Every time they did it, I was like, what the actual fuck?
How do you stop the momentum when you're like, you're circling in the air and
who
you
was
get
the
up there?
First person that ate that tomato? Because it seems anyway, it was crazy.
Oh my God.
But the way that it's portrayed in the documentary, what that team is really working towards all year long is the NCAA National Cheerleading Championship, held annually in Daytona Beach, Florida.
Yeah.
These athletes work so hard. As I just said, they're being thrown through the air. They are lifting bodies into the air. They are working injured. Make no mistake about it. These are extraordinary athletes. I think I read the stat that cheerleading is second only to football for concussions sustained during practice.
Oh my God.
It is no fucking joke.
Suze, I'm going to derail for just 1 second.
Do it.
I'm curious, just in terms of the documentary and the creation of it, if we're all working towards that championship and the championship did not allow it to be filmed, how did they deal with that?
The way that they deal with it, that's a wonderful question. The way they deal with it is they have an interview with a representative from the National Cheerleading Association where he's explaining why they're not going to permit the documentarians him explaining why he's not going to permit a camera crew to be present for this competition. But the interviewer says, how do you feel about having people film it on their phones? And he was like, that's fine. There's only so much we can do. So all of the footage is filmed on phones.
From the phones. How genius. And he's got someone saying it's fine.
They've got their consent on camera.
Very clever.
Yeah, good question. Back to the Spark. So all of these athletes on the Navarro cheer team work hard. But if you've watched the show, or when you do watch the show, there is one person that we all fall in love with. Jerry Harris. Jerry is a super hard worker. He's what's called a stunter. He's one of the people who is lifting other people up into the air. He's throwing and catching people. Jerry, I'm getting chills right now talking about Jerry. Jerry is passionate about the sport. He's been doing it for years and years and years. He knows all the players. He knows all the stats. He knows all the routines. But because he doesn't have some of the tumbling skills, it's not a given that he's going to make it onto the mat, as they call it. So apparently, like if there's 40 people on the team, they will select 20 people to actually make it onto the mat on a given day during a period of time or at the championships.
Whoa.
Because people get injured so frequently, they have to have a deep bench.
Yes.
And so it's not a given that Jerry's going to make it onto the mat and actually compete at the championships at Daytona Beach. But Jerry is really remarkable because he keeps on working. He continually, it's like he cannot do anything but cheer on his teammates. He remains endlessly positive. And there's this beautiful moment where he gets up the nerve to ask his coach what he can work harder on. And they're all sort of in love with and intimidated by their coach.
Yeah.
But he's like talking himself into talking to her and asking her what he can work harder on. And she gives him really good straight answers. She's like, learn such and such's track. Learn such and such's track because I'm not sure how I'm worried about his stamina or something like that. And Jerry's like, I got it. And like immediately keeps on working. You can see visible growth in his work during practice. You can see his confidence growing outside of practice. You can see his emotional maturity growing.
Oh my God.
You see the results of his hard work. Like the way they capture it is, he's really inspiring. He's just a really inspiring person. He has not had an easy life. He doesn't look like what you might think of if I say male cheerleader. You might have this picture of a person whose top part looks like a triangle. He doesn't look like that.
Like Ken doll.
Like a Ken doll. Doesn't look like that. And Jerry is like the master of what they call mat talk, which is where even if you're not on the mat, you are on the side of the mat and you are, even in practice, you are cheering on the people on the mat. And Jerry is the king of mat talk and just willing people to
do their best
and to do their best. He talks about his mom in the series and about her being she's this very positive, like very sparkish person. And you see how that same quality that he regards in his mother moves through Jerry.
She must be really proud. That's really sweet.
Yeah. So when I was an acting student, I remember my teachers saying things like, great artists make the artistry invisible, and don't show us that you're working hard up there. And I sort of half understood what they meant at the time. I had a misguided notion that some performers are just born great. And I had another misguided notion that the way to make things look effortless, if my teachers wanted it to look more effortless, was to put less effort into it. And I experimented with caring less and preparing less. And this was really true for me when it came to auditioning. There may be some people for whom it's true and for whom that really works, that with minimal preparation and rehearsal, they do their best, freest work. But it was not true for me. And it's taken some time, but now I have a better, I'm the tender age of 50. I have a better sense of how much work I need to do to prepare. And the answer is different for everyone. But for me, it's more work, not less, to make it look, really effortless and free and easy. Right. So today I want to share with you some people who make it look easy and free and playful. People who hit, as they say on the Navarro cheer squad. But when you peek behind the curtain, you see how invested these people are in preparation. And that is my spark for today, preparation.
Woo!
First up on the spark train, hoot hoot. that was an owl train that has sparks that it's shipping across the country. I don't know. First up on the spark train, hoot hoot, is Beyonce. One of my favorite things about the documentary films that Beyonce has released is that she really shows the hard work. Cams, have you enjoyed and partaken in any of Beyonce's documentary
not
work?
Not all, but I do love her.
Before we see the glamour and the fierceness, or in the midst of it, she really reveals the motherfucking work.
Mm-hmm.
The first time I experienced this was her documentary, Life is But a Dream. There's a segment where Beyonce is preparing to perform Run the World. Who runs the world? Girls.
Girl.
On the 2011 Billboard Music Awards. She worked with this team of graphic designers and about 1 million dancers to build this piece that is, Camion, it is a feat of performance art. And there's this footage of her exhausted in the hallway of her hotel. They position it like it's hard to say, but like 48 to 24 hours before the performance. Mm-hmm. And she is out in the hotel hallway with a laptop. There's room service carts rolling by. She's stepping aside as hotel guests pass through. And then she's running this very difficult technical sequence over and over. It was, I don't know if you remember this, or if you ever saw it, but it's a sequence where the graphic designers have created an animation and she is interacting with in front of this animation, and
it has to be
spot
on
completely. In a voiceover, she says all of the practices, all of the thought that went into that, but it's not working because we lost a day of rehearsal. We never got a chance to do it right, but it was show day, so the first time we were going to see it through was on live TV in front of millions of viewers. Oof. It was crazy. So in front of a global audience, this is the first time that all of the elements of this insanely complicated piece of performance art were going to come together. Talk about a big wave rider.
Holy
Beyonce
shit.
is a big wave rider.
She is.
And she said, Billboard was a huge artistic gamble, but the urge to get my message out was so overwhelming, I didn't even pay attention to the risk I was taking.
Oh.
And nobody knew I was pregnant during that performance. And I'm cool with that. I'm not interested in a free ride. But it absolutely proved to me that women have to work much harder to make it in this world. Mm-hmm. That performance is, it is unbelievable. And I love that she pulls the curtain back and lets us see that it was a risk. Like this was... But she was moved by the message of that song and wanting to make this impact and tell this story in a way that really like rocked people's worlds.
I love her mission to spread this message. When I think about like my 16-year-old niece who I love dearly, Bailey, if you're listening.
Hi, Bailey.
Hi, Bailey. It's this work. Like there's so many people growing up today who like see the shiny part of it, who are like, that's what I want to do. Why can't that happen to me? Why can't I do that? Well, because there are 200 hours of rehearsal.
Oh my gosh.
Leading up to that moment.
And you have to have the
work
nerves
you have to do.
Of steel. Mm-hmm. You have to work on having the nerves of steel.
You have to do the work before anyone's putting the camera on you.
Yeah. I think that she is a fantastic example of someone who makes it look easy.
Yeah.
But in reality, when you pull back the curtain, you see
she hustles.
And you may say she hustles. And you may say, yeah, well, if I had a team of graphic designers, stage managers, directors, choreographers, 200 dancers, pyro, lighting designer, I could do that. But I posit that Beyonce has always been an extraordinarily hard worker. Mm-hmm. And now with this more elevated stage and a bigger megaphone and all of that support, she is only working harder.
That's right. You see those videos of like her and Destiny's Child when they were younger.
Working
their butts off.
Yeah.
Before the national spotlight was on them.
Yeah.
And then at every stage. And that's how you get to have graphic designers and 200 dancers and et cetera, et cetera.
So anyway, so that was in 2011.
Great.
Jump forward to 2019. Cams, did you see Homecoming?
No.
Again, she is an artist. It is high art. I feel like you can really see, I think both, I know this to be true of Jay-Z. I know this less about Beyonce, but I feel like they have both been influenced greatly by the art world. They are artists. Her spark for Homecoming was that her life path didn't take her to college, and she wished that she could have, and she basically created her own homecoming.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. In her documentary, Homecoming, she said, "It's my first time back home on the stage after giving birth. I'm creating my own homecoming, and it's hard. There were days that I thought I'd never be the same physically and that my strength and endurance would never be the same. I had to rebuild my body from cut muscles." And what she was talking about is she was coming back from a very difficult pregnancy. In the documentary, we learned that she was supposed to do Coachella the year prior, but she got pregnant unexpectedly. It ended up being twins. And she said, "My body went through more than I knew it could. I was 218 pounds the day I gave birth. I had an extremely difficult pregnancy. I had high blood pressure. I developed toxemia, preeclampsia, and in the womb, one of my baby's hearts paused a few times, so I had to get an emergency C-section." She says in Homecoming on that first day back in rehearsal that she wants to get to the point where she can do Soul Cycle and rehearse and do stairs in the same day.
Wow.
And to get her there, her diet and schedule were extremely strict. She said, "In order for me to meet my goals, I'm limiting myself to no bread, no carbs, no sugar, no dairy, no meat, no fish, no alcohol. I'm hungry, just trying to figure out how to balance being a mother of a 6-year-old and twins that need me and give of myself creatively is a lot to juggle. It's not like before when I could rehearse 15 hours straight."
Whoa.
She explains, "I have children, I have a husband, I have to take care of my body." She also says in retrospect, she would never push that far again.
Really?
But I was like, it's not like before when I could rehearse 15 hours straight.
Right. She was pushing herself really hard even then.
She's a hard worker. She went on to say, "I respect things that take work. I respect things that are built from the ground up. I'm super specific about every detail. I personally selected every dancer, every light, the material on the steps, the height of the pyramid, the stage set, the shape of the pyramid. Every patch was hand sewn. Every tiny detail had an intention." She is an artist. She has a vision. And I feel like she's working as hard, if not harder, than everybody on her team.
She's running circles around.
It's just amazing. Regarding rehearsing Homecoming, she said, "I think we all work to our limit. And there are notes every time because there's always something we can improve on." If you don't come from a performative or theatrical background, what she's talking about is after each rehearsal run, you get notes. You get somebody, a director, somebody in a position of sort of viewing it externally, hopefully objectively, to give you notes to improve upon the next rehearsal or run. So she's a meticulous perfectionist, hardworking. Like she just rocks my socks when it comes to preparation. Yeah.
And then you see her and you think, wow, that was, it doesn't like, it's not like, oh, that was easy, but feels like it doesn't require a lot of effort on her part because it just happens naturally. When I watch for her.
My misconception is she was born to do that. Now that may be true,
and it's still a lot of work.
She's so good that it's sort of, you don't realize how much work has gone into that 3-minute performance.
That's right.
Another person, just now for something completely different, who I think is a master of preparation, is Martin Short. In a piece in Vanity Fair, it said, "Martin Short gives good talk show." David Letterman's band leader, Paul Schaefer, explained after a late show taping, "A guy like David Letterman is so happy when Marty's on because he knows he can relax. He knows that Marty will take care of it, that he's going to give you a couple segments of Sacco," which is the most Paul Schaefer type sentence ever uttered. In an interview on vulture.com with David Marchese, Martin Short explained how he has become legendarily great on talk shows. He is known in the industry as being legendary when it comes to his talk show appearances. You think these people were just popped out of the womb doing this well? Martin Short's words: "What I do for a typical talk show appearance, and I'm not exaggerating, is I'll send in something like 18 pages ahead of time. They start with an idea for an opening, and then it could go into this story could work, and that story, and that story, and that story, and that story, and that story. Then we whittle it down. I'll probably be on the phone with the segment producer for at least an hour and a half going through ideas for material. Then you have to balance all that during the appearance by making it look improvised in the moment, not speaking too much, trying to find common ground with the host. The first American talk show I did, he's Canadian. The first American talk show I did was December of 82, and it was Letterman. I remember thinking, I've got to come across as loose as I can be at a dinner party. So an impersonation of myself being relaxed was the approach from the beginning.
Nice.
Does that blow your mind? Would you have ever guessed that somebody would put in? Now, I know that people prepare for their talk show appearances, and they're often prepared by a segment producer, but 18 pages of raw material?
No way.
How about it?
Most of it feels like they've had an agreement of like, okay, I have a funny story from the set of that movie.
I'm going to tell the story about
I
this.
have a funny thing about my pet.
Yeah.
And that'll be a wrap.
That'll be it. And then I'll promote the movie and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
In the Vulture interview, which is a great interview, especially if you're like me and you love comedy. Martin Short goes on to say, the people I work well with, Steve Martin is an example, it's because we work in the same way. Steve and I will walk off stage, sweat on our faces, the crowd's still cheering, and we'll be discussing if we change that one line. We're both fascinated by the process of whittling away the sculpture. It is interesting to me that like goes to like, and that he's also interested in working with another hard worker.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I also want to say something about that. Like, there's something in that is like not afraid of not having achieved perfection. So crowd is cheering, that's great, but still want to tinker with it and you know, talk about those moments before I forget. Like, this is how we could elevate it.
It's very much the mountain has no top. Like we keep striving, we keep marching up, we keep reaching.
It's not a judgment of, you know what I mean? Like to understand that like, that doesn't mean that wasn't a wonderful performance.
Right.
And we can still
we
can still go further.
Martin Short recounted a time when he was a guest on Dennis Miller's talk show. Dennis Miller used to have a talk show on HBO. And it was at the same time that Martin Short was doing his show, Primetime Glick, where he plays the character Jiminy Glick, which is one of my
favorite.
I love Martin Short as Jiminy Glick.
So
it's
good.
Fucking great.
I wish he would.
So he said, we were standing in the wings as Dennis was about to do his monologue. And Dennis said something to me like, can you believe it? In a half hour, we're done. And I said, in a half hour, I'd still be putting on my first layer of Glick makeup. How do you explain why my approach to a talk show took 16 hours a day and his was done in a half hour? I think it's just because I don't know how to do what Dennis could do. And this is sort of how I feel. I have Steve Pasquale is a great example. Somebody who memorizes super quickly and can just like taking that information really quickly, takes direction really quickly. It can just like, boop. I don't memorize quickly. So that takes me longer, first off. And I just I think it takes me longer to metabolize information. And so I will never work as fast as Steve Pasquale, which might be why he's built for speed. He's built for film and TV, and I'm built for something else. But he was saying the counter to that is there is a quality of investigation that he may forego, that I may, because it takes me longer, I might get to, sort of mess around with that he may not get to because he can work so quickly. So who knows? Different brains, different people. Vulture journalist David Marchese recounted to Martin Short a conversation he had with his friend. David's friend said, Martin Short is always on. And Martin Short replied, your friend's comment is a comment from someone who doesn't understand show business. When you see me, you're seeing me in a situation where I'm there to entertain. If you catch me energized and doing jokes with Johnny Carson and assume that's also what I'm like at 2 a.m, it's like saying, boy, I bet that surgeon's got a scalpel in his hand 24/7. And there's something about that where I'm like, Beyonce is not Sasha Fierce when she's at home with her makeup off and just trying to get make sure that have the kids been fed. And they are in peak performance mode. That's right. They are putting all of this energy into peak performance mode, and it is something heightened that they're doing.
For sure.
Yeah.
For sure.
jumping.
Okay.
In a 60 Minutes interview with Steve Kroft, Will Smith said, I've never really viewed myself as particularly talented. I've viewed myself as slightly above average in talent. And where I excel is ridiculous, sickening work ethic. You know, while the other guy's sleeping, I'm working. While the other guy's eating, I'm working. While the other guy's making love, I mean, I'm making love too, but I'm working really hard at it. I see it when I watch world championship surfers. I see it when I watch great improvisers who have put in their 10,000 hours.
That's right.
Not rehearsing specifically what words they're going to say, but rehearsing the game, like understanding the game and rehearsing flow state, essentially. I watch Martin Short videos when I want to be lifted up. I do. I follow hashtag Jiminy Glick on my Instagram because I love regular doses of Martin Short. When I see Beyonce or those cheerleaders from Navarro College cameoing, nothing will make me cry faster. If you would like to make me cry, just put on a tape of like the Navarro cheer squad at championships. I burst into tears.
Really?
Yes. And it's partially because the work is so unbelievably remarkable. But it's also because I've peeked behind the curtain and I've seen how much time, how much work, how much of themselves, and how much preparation these people have devoted to these extraordinary feats. As I've aged, as I said, I've gotten more attuned with that sweet spot for me between preparation and then release or ease or play or flow when it comes to work and then performance. I remember when I was in college, this slightly older actor named Lynn said, I never heard it before. She said, when you act, you want to prepare like you're going on a trip and you pack very carefully and you make sure you have everything you need. And then when it's time to leave on the trip, you leave your suitcase at the door. She was using language to try to capture what it's like to do all of that planning and all of that preparation and then let it go. And I think it is so true for all sorts of performative things, certainly like acting, public speaking, singing, stand-up comedy, dance, cheerleading. And I also think it's true in the mastery of all sorts of forms: painting, writing, photography, composing, surfing, improv. You work to master the craft and then you like let it rip. And when we get tired, because we do get tired, we're little Beyoncés, we can broadcast news, cry it out. But after we've gotten it out of our system, I know, because I've seen it, I know we can work harder because we've been sparked by Martin Short and by Beyonce Knowles and by Jerry.
And Jerry.
And that is my spark.
Suze, that's a good spark. Preparation. And if we can embrace it and enjoy it as part of the process as well,
which can sometimes be hard. Let's be frank.
It can be like, I just want to watch some TV tonight.
I just want to get to the yummy goodness of the event, of the championships. You don't get to the championships unless you do the 10,000 hours of preparation.
It's so true. You just don't, and you don't get to that level, and you don't see the amount of success
you have to watch cheer.
Okay,
or not.
Wait.
Now I will say
wait.
this: Nathan had it stressed him out because there's a lot of what I'll call, for lack of a better term, jump scares, because it can be a very mundane world in the day of the life of cheer, and then all of a sudden, something happens. So it's extraordinary.
Okay.
Yeah.
No, I think I'm going to enjoy it.
I do too.
I'll probably, once I turn it on, I feel like I need a stretch of time because I think it's going to be a binge. You know what I'm going to enjoy now? What? A little break. A little break. Back in a sec. That was awesome. The Spark
And we're back. There's something I wanted to say that I think is relevant to this conversation and my spark of preparation, which is Beyonce talked about in one of the documentaries, she talked about how she used to love it, beg for people to make her angry right before showtime. Because she said she would just go out in front of the audience and be like, like machine gun, Sasha Fierce, get out. And I think she does all of that preparation, and then she wants something to just like spark her, to light it up and to get into that flow state, like however it's, however it's ignited.
That's right.
I thought that was interesting. To switch gears is super important. That if you live in that preparation space, that's where my acting teachers were like, you look like you're working really hard, and we see all of the work.
We see all that preparation, but leave your bags at the door.
Leave your bags at the door.
And that's basically what she's doing when it's like, shift me into a different mindset.
Make me mad.
Now. Make me mad. But you know what is interesting? When we do a lot of like coaching work or workshops with people, there's a mindset of like, I'm working on this thing and they're talking about it and, at peace with it. And it's a certain tone. And then you might ask like, what was the original spark? What led you to here? And in some cases, they start talking about something that fired them up and they were so freaking angry about it. And, and they suddenly like come to life. And you're like, now that's that energy. Can you use that energy into your creative process? But somehow they're, not making the connection that too can feed into the work in a productive way. And it sounds like
super productive
Beyonce is channeling it.
Because it's raw material and it's fuel.
It's fuel.
It's both. Cams, do you have a spark for me?
I do. I think you might be right about the yin and the yang of this episode.
There's something about your description that made me think maybe so, but...
Well, I want to start by asking you, can you remember like when was the last time you were really, truly bored?
Oh, what a good question. No.
I couldn't either.
No.
I could not either. I racked my brain and I was like, I think the last time I felt something akin to boredom was childhood. Like for me, it's like before the cell phone.
That's a good question.
Maybe sitting at the DMV without a book or anything to read like 15 years ago, maybe.
Oh, yeah. Like
I guess
those
that would
moments.
be boring.
I guess, you know what? There are moments where I try to put my cell phone away and challenge myself to be present. And sometimes before something captures my curiosity,
there's a moment.
My mind is hunting momentarily because it is almost feels intolerable at this point because we always have our magic computer friend in our pocket. But
that's right.
It's momentary. And if I'm honest with myself, breaking up with your cell phone, I seek to escape it. So as quickly as possible.
That's right.
Yeah.
Well, that's what I want to talk about today.
Oh, that space.
That space. Well, so like, I think when I reflect on this, like as a kid, of course, like since we were born before the turn of the century. I like to say that now.
Man, I can't.
Before the turn of this century. Like boredom to me felt like there's nothing good on TV.
Yeah.
Because there were only like 5 channels. There's no one in the neighborhood to play with. And my mind is like too active to read. I just couldn't like connect with a book sometimes. And that to me, like, epitomizes boredom. But now I feel like I don't know if I can be bored because it seems like there's always something that I need to respond to or to-do list or thoughts of how I'll tackle all the things I need to do, or there's always engagement, brain engagement and stimulus, the music and a podcast and noise and television and screens and, all of that. Like I feel now like I actually crave the idea of letting my mind rest a little bit.
Yeah.
But if that happened, I don't know that I would call it bored. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So I was sparked by an article that I came across this week in Stylist by Mina Alexander, and it got me thinking. The article was called "The Science of Boredom: When Did We Lose the Ability to Be Bored?" And I think it struck me because it hadn't occurred to me that we had, quote, lost the ability to be bored. And it certainly didn't occur to me that that might not be a good thing. So here I am, sparked by this article. And I'm not sure yet, like in a good way, in a bad way, in a weird way. Don't know if I'm in agreement or disagreement with it. Let's investigate. So obviously we're living in a time when, whether we're aware of it or not, we are conditioned to avoid feeling bored, whether it's to reach for our phones, that's the most obvious one, or turn on the TV, but there's stimulus everywhere. Even the world around us now is built to protect us from nothingness. In 2013, the BBC reported that it was found that buttons at those like pedestrian crossings really serve no purpose than just to give us the feeling that we're doing something, like we have some control over something. We're just pushing the button.
I think in some cases that may be true, and in some cases they do activate.
They may have updated those, in the years since. But in Mary Mann's 2017 book, Yawn, Adventures in Boredom, she writes that most of the closed door buttons in American elevators also serve no purpose. Just make you feel like, oh, good, I'm doing something. I'm taking charge of this.
I'm a hamster in a lab. Oh my God.
But what exactly is boredom? According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the word first appeared in Charles Dickens' Victorian saga Bleak House.
Really?
Yep. And that was published in 1853. Tolstoy described it in Anna Karenina as, quote, a desire for desires, which I really love.
Yeah.
A desire for desires. So is it the absence of stimulation?
That'd be a great name for a romance novel.
Right? A desire for desires.
A desire for desires.
Want to want something.
And the lead character is named Desires Thibodeau.
So is boredom the absence of stimulation? Is it the brain with nothing to do? Another definition of boredom is the state of being weary and restless through lack of interest. Dr. John Eastwood, a psychology professor who runs a boredom lab at York University in Canada, defines it as, quote, the uncomfortable feeling of wanting but being unable to engage in satisfying activity. Today, psychologists consider it to be one of the most understudied emotions there is.
And I don't know that more funding is going to flow to it because there is an abundance of readily available stimulation.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
It's something that people experience less now with screens.
That's right.
I just have to interject for a moment to share with you. I'm sparked by this. Have I ever showed you? I think I might have posted this photograph on my Instagram, but I did not post the accompanying sound recording. I was on the A train. I was headed downtown or uptown. The A train is a longer train ride if you're going, say, from Inwood to Midtown Manhattan. And I was headed uptown. There was a little girl. She and her parents had come from some sort of an event for kids. Her face was painted it was like beautifully done. It was like high-end face painting, if that's a thing, high quality face painting. And she had clearly just come from this event. And she was just like a wriggly mess. And over again, she just kept saying, I'm bored. I'm hungry. I'm bored.
I can't.
I'm hungry. Long enough on a loop that I could get out my phone, activate the recorder, record a long passage of her doing this song essentially, and then take a series of photographs of her. And I was holding my phone pretty discreetly, but I captured one where she totally is side-eyeing my camera. And I was like, I love this photo. I was like, I feel like I made up a story. This is a story I made up that she had been catered to all day. All day. This day had been designed around catering to her.
Yes.
And the refrain, I'm bored.
I'm hungry.
On an endless loop. But because I'm someone who, when I could be annoyed by that, instead I was like, I'm going to see if I can grab a little piece of art out of this.
I love that.
Don't know what I'll make with it. Apparently, it was all headed towards this moment.
All towards
and the
this.
Spark File podcast. Camia,
Yes.
she's our mascot for this
She's
episode.
Our mascot. I'm bored. I'm tired.
I'm hungry.
Yes.
We're going to use her picture as the picture
God. You
for
have
this
to send
episode.
It to me.
Absolutely. She's our mascot.
Well, yeah. We'll see when we finish if she still is. But right now,
Okay.
she is expressing that. That is.
Sorry to interrupt.
Oh no.
Resume your
I
spark.
just don't even know what to say. There's 20,000 things I want to say about that. I will hold my tongue about most of them, but I think that the real thing that these psychologists are getting to is like it is an actual mental state, and it has to do with the desire, like desperately wanting to do something, but nothing in particular. And the unoccupied mind, like the issue of whether or not what we're doing can capture our cognitive interest.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that dissonance, I guess, like the desire, but the inability to have it is frustrating. This Dr. Eastwood says, we're wired to want to engage with the world, exercise our abilities, and realize our potential to stop stagnating as a species. So we've evolved to find the state of being unoccupied quite adverse.
I feel this.
Right?
I mean, occasionally I'll have I'll have a little tiny breath of what could potentially be free time.
Yeah.
And sometimes it triggers some anxiety or fear about like, oh, well, I need to go back to my to-do list. I need to go look at my table of things that need to be mended.
That's right.
Or whatever.
Must be productive. Because it's a constant need to be productive. Yeah.
But you're saying that there's like a biological imperative that we have in order to preserve the species.
Well, Dr. Eastwood is saying that that's why he's speculating that is why it has become such an adverse kind of like relationship with it.
Interesting.
So yeah, I don't know. This article really intrigued me, partly because like I don't fear boredom, but I also didn't see it as a positive. So this what we'll get into really enlightened me in a way.
Yeah.
They also talk about people like oftentimes boredom is when we're alone, like can come upon us when we're alone.
Yeah.
And that there are people who, truly don't like being alone. They did a study in 2014 at the University of Virginia, and they found that people typically did not enjoy spending 6 to 15 minutes in a room by themselves. Many people, in fact, most of the people, preferred to administer electric shocks to themselves instead of just being alone with their thoughts.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Which I'm like, that amazes me because like, I guess also as I've gotten older, like I don't dislike being alone, but I do know people who very much dislike it. And if possible, will fill their schedule. That's sort of akin, like a cousin to like some people who don't like there to be silence and must fill it. And I am intrigued by this concept. So Bruce Daisley, author of The Joy of Work, is a big advocate of the theory that an unoccupied mind is a fertile one. In our frantic lives and our hectic offices, many of us just don't have any space for all these moments where our minds wander and we end up a million miles away. But there's so much evidence that our brains are at their most creative and prolific when they're in that state. So then I was like, oh, so wait a minute. You're saying that there's some, like we actually should want this state if possible.
This reminds me, as you're describing it, this reminds me of my meditation practice.
Yes.
And setting aside 2 periods of time each day to essentially, it's structured mind wandering.
That's right. I'm going to get a little bit into that because they do clarify that it's like similar and of relation to meditation, but even less structure.
Even less structure.
Yeah, even less structure.
Yeah.
So Daisley said that giving ourselves a chance to be bored was the key to sparking brilliant ideas. Apparently, Bill Gates, arguably one of the world's greatest minds, knew the power of nothingness when he was the head of Microsoft. He would take himself on what he called think weeks twice a year, where he would go away, unplug, have nothing on his schedule, and nothing to do except let himself think.
Wow.
Now, that was an idea I really liked.
That's radical.
I was like, whoa.
It also reminds me of how to break up with your cell phone and the discomfort of unplugging for even 2 days, 2 hours, you know what I mean?
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And it doesn't sound like his was like, I can't look at my phone, but maybe look at your phone in the morning and look at it at the end of the day. But long stretches of time where he allowed himself to think.
I'm into this.
And do nothing. So at its core, boredom is, quote, a search for neural stimulation that isn't satisfied, Dr. Sandy Mann says. If we can't find that, our mind will create it. As demonstrated by the new study and plenty of others before it, boredom can enable creativity and problem solving by allowing the mind to wander and daydream. There's no other way of getting that stimulation, so you have to go into your head, Mann says. You may be surprised with what you come up with when you do. So Dr. Mann is the author of The Science of Boredom. She conducted one of the defining studies behind the link between a state of boredom and creativity. She asked two groups of people to think up as many different uses for like a pair of plastic cups as they could. But one group was giving a mind-numbing task of like copying from the phone book first, like super boredom. And the study found that the boredom induced by the passive activity resulted in a daydreaming state that helped them come up with way more ideas afterwards. Doing nothing. Doing nothing stimulates the creative juices, which means you can problem solve and learn how to engage yourself, says Mann. It's also stress releasing because you come up with solutions to things that have been worrying you. Now, this reminds me of the benefits of, like, the spark might be a small relation to puzzle piece.
Yeah.
And, you know, doing things like that, or like knitting, where sometimes you go long stretches in like repetitive motion, but your mind is going elsewhere on little trips.
I think you're right. I think you're onto something here.
So as a child, and especially for those of us who didn't have screens growing up, like long stretches of free time really encouraged imaginative play. And for us, like creating entire worlds in our heads, or making up new games with specific and complicated rules. Like the kids in our neighborhood, we were, you know, we were totally into that and didn't have anything else to entertain ourselves with. The author of How to Be Bored, I had no idea so many books on boredom existed, by the way.
Who knew?
The author of How to Be Bored, Eva Hoffman, a former editor of the New York Times, really believes boredom is key to getting in touch with our true selves. In order for us to understand what we want or what we enjoy, we need to spend some time with ourselves. And I agree with that. Like, I feel like if we're always being stimulated from the outside, it's hard to know sometimes what I really think. What I really want, you know, and frankly, like, I just sometimes have to be alone to like let it settle and think it out. But it is a lot about like pushing through this uncomfortable moment that we've talked about. Being alone seems to be a big barrier for people. Dr. Mann conducted another study in which people were asked to leave their phones behind, step into an empty, soundproof room. She said, obviously, a lot of people ran screaming, but those who managed to stay said they found it pleasant after a while. They went through a pain barrier of boredom and then said it felt like a respite, like having a hot bath. And then I read this great article in The Atlantic called The Virtues of Isolation by Brent Crane. And it pointed out, of course, we have a negative association with being alone. Like, humans have long stigmatized solitude. It has been considered an inconvenience, something to avoid, a punishment, a realm of like loners. In prison, we put people in solitude.
Yeah.
As kids, we might get time out where we have to spend time alone because we've done something bad. In fact, like children's first fears, according to Freud, typically relate to darkness and solitude. So, of course, we learn to fear being alone, or at least learn that it's undesirable. We don't want to spend time alone.
Yeah.
So it makes sense that we avoid it in being alone. But another element to our avoidance of boredom is that it can hit us when we're at work. And actually, that's even more inappropriate, right?
Yes.
Like it just doesn't seem acceptable that I could be getting paid to be here and be seen feeling bored.
I think I just remembered the last time I was truly bored. And it was like
it could be
office
at
work. Yes.
Right?
Yeah.
That's right. Obviously, it doesn't seem like it's okay to look idle when we're being paid for our time, but actually taking a moment to let your mind wander might actually help you solve the problem that you're trying to come up with, or an issue you've been working on. Dr. Mann says a lot of constant frenetic activity in the workplace is to show that we're busy.
Yeah,
because
look busy.
Being
Jesus
busy
is coming.
oh my God, it's so true. Being busy is what makes you valuable. But if we're able to be a bit more thoughtful at work, then we can become more productive in the long run.
Wow.
And a cultural shift is needed for that. I mean, first of all, I should recognize, I think I've been this way. I think for a good decade in my life, I was busy.
Yeah.
I was that.
Yeah.
So I want to, for all the people who may have known me during that time, I apologize. It's effing annoying. And it's not actually productive or constructive. It's just busy. And I think what a lot of people that I read about in the process of researching this spark are saying is that it's counterintuitive, but if you could actually stop doing anything for just a little while, you might come up with some of the answers you're looking for. You might come up with the plan you've been thinking about. It's not all in keeping yourself busy all the time.
Now, there is an argument that has been made about in the doing of things, that Chuck Close quote about like,
That's
by
right.
the doing of things, it's that one that's like, inspiration is for amateurs. The rest of us just show up and get to work.
That's right.
With the knowledge that by like the doing and the making, doors and windows will fly open that would not have unless we were engaged in the doing and the making. That's not an exact quote, but I do relate to that. And I have observed in myself how that is true.
Yep.
And I also, back to the meditation thing, I will tell you, so for instance, a steep learning curve that I navigated recently was learning how to edit sound for the podcast. Yeah. And there would be times when I was stumped. I was stymied by something about this complex professional sound editing software that I could not figure out how to make it work.
Yeah.
And it was going to prevent the episode from happening.
That's right.
And I would go and meditate and let my little mind wander in a structured sort of setting.
Yeah.
Very, very loose wandering. Yeah. And the solution would pop up.
There's a reason for that, Susan. And that is because when we are in like problem solving mode, we're using like the frontal lobe of our brain.
Okay.
We're super focused.
Yes.
Hyper focused. And we feel like we're really working on something.
Yeah.
But the problem is your brain in that function is scanning familiar territory. You're going through all problem solving that you've done in the past, which may not be the answer to this problem.
So it's clicking through the archives, the database.
That's right.
Da-da-da-da.
All in the frontal lobe.
Yeah.
This quote unquote boredom, letting your mind wander, uses a different part of the brain, and it actually is scanning subconscious thoughts and ideas that could be the answer to your problem. That's how we get eureka moments. That's how we get wait a minute, I was at my computer for 10 hours and I couldn't solve this, but I got up to make a sandwich or take a shower and suddenly like there's my
solution
idea
comes or an idea. That's fantastic.
So there's a real reason for that. I feel like we need Anthony Viniziali here to explain that to us. But,
I believe in you, baby.
Woo, I did it.
I do think that there is something to be said. I don't want to jump your spark.
Yeah.
Tell me to fuck off. But about having the presence of mind to be able to shift gears essentially and be like, okay, now I'm in making mode and I'm making, and now I'm going into another gear, which is mind wandering mode.
I think that's exactly it. And I think that they're all saying to give yourself permission. Like, the hectic overactivity isn't healthy. Yeah. It doesn't make you more productive. Yes. And giving yourself permission to just slow down and let your mind go in its own direction for a few minutes. Anyone can do it at any time. You just need to let yourself do it.
To make this about us for a moment,
of course,
we have talked about, and you just mentioned, and I was just saying to Nathan this, like within the last 48 hours, I used to stay so busy. Yeah. Calendar booked, morning, every noon, moment. Night, every single day. Busy. Yeah. And it is only in the last few years that I have restructured my life so that there is less busyness. Yes. And is it just the aging process, or is it this restructuring? Is it a combo platter of this and other factors that kind of for the first time in my life, I have been able to listen to what Bart Freundlich called those low voices, that I've been able to hear what does Susan really want, to speak about myself in the third person. What do I really want to say? What do I want to make? And I don't know. I was bemoaning to you earlier today. I wish I would have struck upon sort of this work earlier that we're doing, but I think it could only happen maybe at this level of maturation, and also having a little more time to have heard the low voices.
I agree with all of that. I also think that we are a product of our cultural times. And so, like it or not, I think culturally we're all coming to this realization now. Like these types of studies about boredom or about meditation or about mindfulness, it's really been in the last, say, 10 years where these things have come to the surface culturally. Yeah. Some lucky people have been aware of them for a long time. Yeah. And some also lucky people will get this information when they're 20, and maybe it will affect, all of those decades of their life. But we're, getting this information now. And I do think it is a combo of having lived the years that we've lived, having the information float to the surface culturally and be more prevalent and acceptable now too. I mean, no one talked about self-care when we were hustling and working, 14 grinding jobs. It out. No one said those two words together. Self-care, what? But now, hopefully, because as a culture, we're all understanding how that can benefit us. There'll be generations of people who benefit from it, at an earlier age, and I'm glad for them. I really am. Wow. So the interesting thing, you were talking about meditation. They make clear, all of them, to say this. They aren't talking specifically about meditation or yoga. Those things are great and they have similar benefits, but they don't really qualify as boredom because they are doing something very specific, and knowing that you are consciously doing it, maybe crossing it off the list. Like, I did my meditation for the morning, I did it for the evening, makes it feel less like indulgent, because they're pointing out that we're still living in a society where just letting your mind wander, staring out the window for 20 minutes doesn't feel like that's okay. Like, we don't let ourselves do it because we could have used that time more productively. So admitting that you sat and stared into space for an hour seems less acceptable than saying I practiced, mindfulness, or I took a yoga class. Also good. They're not saying those aren't good. They're just saying, can it be possible that it is okay for you not to do anything that you perceive as productive right now? for just 20 minutes.
I can't remember if we've talked about this on the podcast or if I just have it in my Spark file, literally, but stop me if you've heard this one.
Okay.
Have we talked about soft fascination?
Mm-mm.
I'm blowing my Spark for another day, but there's this new body of research it's coming, it's just emerging right now about soft fascination, and it has another name. It's ART, it's something restorative therapy, something like that. I can't remember. And it is looking at nature, just like looking at nature or looking at a fire or looking at clouds pass.
Yes.
And they did a study. I hope I don't have this in front of me, so I hope I'm not misquoting this terribly, but with like ER nurses, and they gave these trauma nurses a break. And one set of nurses would like go out and like look at the sky for 15 minutes and look and just sort of take in nature in some sort of way, what they called soft fascination, which is just letting your mind wander while your eyes take in some sort of like watching water go by or a fire crackle in a fireplace. Yeah. And then the other set of nurses just got like a standard 15-minute break, and how much more healing and restorative so this isn't exactly your Spark, but I feel like it touches your similar Spark, which is you add a little nature to the mix, which can feel indulgent to people, I guess, or special, like it's a special treat.
Well, I think because it is, I don't know, I think like it does stimulate the brain in a soft way. Like I think that's a really great, I don't know, it's a great name for it, soft fascination. But they are talking about like a purposefully tranquil activity like yoga doesn't meet the definition of boredom because
it's an activity.
Yeah, it doesn't meet
the meditation
trying
is an activity
and failing to find stimulation. Yeah. So trying and failing is the thing that's boredom. So they say to tap into true boredom, they suggest picking an activity that requires little or no concentration, like walking a familiar route, but without music or a podcast, right?
This is challenging.
It's hard.
I'll be honest.
Because your response to that was exactly mine. I was like, oh, now I get it. I avoid that. Like I like to walk, but damn it, if I don't have my headphones, I'm like, oh no,
what I'm hearing you say though
this.
Is there is potential. We've been like avoiding it, but there is potential benefit from it.
Gold in them their hills.
Gold in them their hills, because you may get treats.
That's right. That's right.
Maybe
if you can just get, past that initial barrier of discomfort, which why does that seem like such a recurring theme? I feel like that comes up so much more in my life now of just like,
I feel like we've had this conversation today already. Yep.
I feel like just get through that, like 5 minutes of discomfort.
Sitting down to write and trying to get yourself into flow.
Yeah.
Yep.
It's so interesting. Yeah. So obviously it is essential to unplug. We talk about that a lot too. But Dr. Mann says our cultural attachment to our phones is paradoxically both destroying our ability to be bored and preventing us from ever being truly entertained. So we're existing in a state of neither.
Yeah.
Right. So these experts are all really saying that the desire to know ourselves and to quiet our minds can be achieved by allowing ourselves to embrace tedium. And this is where I got a little tickled. Reading this article also introduced me to the most delightful group of people, the Dull Men's Club. This is a group.
They sound amazing.
Amazing. They do to me. I really do. I was so tickled. This group is dedicated to celebrating the ordinary. They're a group of guys who celebrate such mindless hobbies as composting, organizing bookshelves. I mean, I promptly went and found them. Like I follow them on Instagram now. Their website says, Neil collects bricks. Kevin is a roundabout enthusiast. John runs the Apostrophe Protection Society.
Oh my God.
Keith's actual job is watching paint dry. They are passionate about the everyday, unglamorous things in life. They are dull and proud and urge the good ordinary men of the nation to go join them now. Whether you have a thing for pylons or rhubarb, reclaim and celebrate the ordinary. I just found that to be...
Do you have to be a man?
Well, this is a British group. I think we could write to them and ask, like, perhaps,
I don't want to join them, but I'm asking on your behalf.
I know. I'm just curious. Like, I don't know. I don't know if they would let women in, but I just found it to be completely and totally delightful to celebrate the ordinary.
Sparks are everywhere.
And I think that
even some very just like beige sparks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, but for real, because we spend our lives, I think, fantasizing about some future moment of glory as opposed to celebrating the things that you do every day that do feel good. When you organize a bookshelf or create a creative space for yourself, like, is that something that, are you going to win a big award for it and have your Oscar speech for that? No, but it feels really good. It's something that benefited you, as you did it and will benefit you afterwards. I also think a lot of things that they do require intelligence, which I personally feel like we value less and less in this age. So they seemed like a bunch of really interesting human beings. And then that led me to the annual Boring Conference, which takes place in London.
Oh my God.
And this is a one-day celebration of the mundane, the ordinary, the obvious, and the overlooked.
Whoa.
The subjects that they talk about are often considered trivial and pointless, but when examined more closely, reveal themselves to be deeply fascinating. Tickets to this conference sell out. Topics of the presentations have included the inner workings of inkjet printers, the similarities between countries' national anthems, sneezing, the television program Antiques Road Trip, sounds made by vending machines, and Nathan might like this, the features of the Yamaha PSR 175 Portatune keyboard.
It sounds like the Spark File. You're describing the schedule for the conference, and I was like, these all sound like they could be in somebody's Spark File.
They're all Sparks. Apparently, the Boring Conference was created in response to the cancellation of the 2010 Interesting Conference, because that's what you do when the Interesting Conference is canceled. But I found it to be so delightful, the idea of all of these ideas being explored and celebrated.
Well, I don't know, are you to what do we make of it?
Almost, but not quite.
Okay, I'll save my what do we make of it.
Okay. So I think these guys are onto something. Like a study in the Journal of Thinking and Reasoning claims that we are better idea generators when we stop trying so hard and just let our mind wander. This is what I was talking about before. When we use a methodical approach to problem solving, we activate the frontal lobe of our brain.
Yes.
And again, that's familiar territory. So what we're trying to do is relax, let our mind wander.
Get this mullet part working.
Scan the whole thing.
Party in the back, baby.
In the back. It basically expands your scope of thought.
Yes.
Like you're using all of your brain.
Yes.
So the takeaway to me is that some of the things that we might judge ourselves for, like doing nothing or wasting time or not achieving anything today, might actually be the best way to get into the creative mindset. I think about getting out of the way of our brains and letting our brains sort it out, just like a puzzle piece, you know?
Yeah.
Aaron Sorkin famously installed a shower unit in his office because for him, he believes his best ideas come in the shower.
Yes.
And he showers 6 to 8 times a day.
It's I think it's also in The Artist's Way, like that's a thing.
And some people might say like, what a waste of time. Like, why are you showering again? No, he's clearing his mind,
the water,
and resetting.
The pity pat. Yes.
That's right.
Yeah.
So I think in terms of what do we make of it, maybe allow yourself to believe that being unproductive for a little while or being alone and quiet can actually be quite useful. Give yourself permission to do nothing. Trust that your brain is working on that creative solution that you've been looking for. I don't know, maybe I haven't been allowing myself to be bored, and perhaps I should be a little bit more.
Yeah.
Like a little time with an idle mind might make some space for some creativity.
That is a good spark. What do we make of it, Cams?
What do we make of it?
We make, I feel like with all that showering, Aaron Sorkin's skin is a little dried out. So we make a branded Aaron Sorkin skin moisturizer.
You are on fire today.
We've got a million of them. For reals, I can't remember what I've said in real life and what I've said on this podcast, but one of the things that I really take away from this conversation is something I have been trying to institute and have not been doing a great job of, but this helps me underscore it, which is I sit down and start working right off the bat, and I work all the way through until it's time to like meditate, have dinner. And I may even go back and work some more. Maybe not, but maybe I will. And I'm trying to rock a combo platter of what you're talking about, which is just letting my mind off the leash a little bit and letting it wander / soft fascination. So the prescription I've written for myself, which I have not been doing great at, is to simply remember to stand up at least one time during the day.
Yes.
Maybe it's when I'm from my little office on the way to refill my water up or something in the kitchen, and cast my eyes out to the sky. Just look at the sky, look at the view, look at clouds passing by, look at fog rolling in, look at nature. That's it. Yeah. And I forget to do it. And my days are very full. I have a big to-do list, don't we all? And so I forget to do it. But this makes me want to. That's one thing we make of it, is a commitment to carving out even miniature amounts of time to let the mind wander and trusting that. I think this is tied for me to like a little bit of an addiction to workaholism.
That's right.
And feeling like there's a negative connotation to letting my mind just relax and wander.
That's right.
So there's that. Another thing, this is a question. This is a not what do we make of it. It goes back to Bill Gates, and I don't know if you'll have the answer or not, but I'm curious. He's a guy who gets some shit done. When he would go and take these week-long
think
weeks, would he bring books?
I don't know.
What were those days like? This is my question. Were those days, I'm just going to go to my place that I have built at my treehouse in the redwoods and like walk the trails? Or do I get to read books that aren't directly related to my work that I've just been interested in? Or is it truly like, I'm going to try to put myself into a space of boredom? Like I wonder how he structured that time.
I don't know. I think, I don't know the specifics of it, but I do think the spirit of it is that it's not scheduled in any way. And it isn't like I've brought 4 books I hope to get through. No.
Yeah.
It is
to let the mind wander.
Free freedom. And that might mean taking a walk, and that might mean reading a book, and it might mean taking a nap, and it might mean meditating, and it might mean just having, 1 week where you let your mind do that. Because think about it. We don't ever, when do we clear our minds out, let them relax for a minute? It's very rare.
Yeah.
For any length of time. I do think it's good for us to do it once or twice a day if we can. But when I think about his version of it, I'm like, man, when's the last time? Because when I have vacations, we fill it with family time.
100%.
No regrets. But days off, we fill it with activities that we don't get to do during the other days. Yeah.
But also, yes to all those to-do lists and, maintaining relationships. But I will tell the truth on myself and say that my mind wants to flee from this space that you are describing in your beautiful spark. And even though I'm a meditator too, I still...
Well, you do it, but
but it's a structured task. My meditation teacher, Emily Fletcher, hi, Emily, says, and this was a life-changing thing for me to hear these words in this order. Rest is an activity.
Oh.
Rest is an activity.
Yeah.
It counts as an activity, all you busy workaholics.
That's right.
Make sure that you build the activity of rest.
That's right.
And I'm going to go ahead and extrapolate further and say boredom is an activity.
Yeah.
It's great.
And I think what I couldn't get over when I was reading the article was maybe my own like cringing every time they called it boredom. Like, do you have to call it boredom? Like, ugh, because I'm just
that is not sexy branding.
And I'm just adverse to it. Like, right? I don't actually want to get bored. I don't want to be bored. When I hear a child on a train saying they're bored, I'm like, you annoy me. You really annoy me.
I was deeply judgmental of that child. And I also was like, this is a spark for me.
That's right.
And it was all leading to this moment. And I think that she, after
still the mascot,
hearing the case you've made, still the mascot.
Word. We'll take it.
Camion.
Blackwell.
That's great. That's going to help me in my life.
Oh.
And I also want to say, what an amazing accidental. I don't plan this shit.
I like
this
the black and white cookie.
The juxtaposition between like preparation, hard work, blood, sweat, and tears, and the need.
Yeah.
In order to be of service to our creativity. The need for boredom.
That's right. That you have to take a few moments and let your mind just wants to help you. Let it help you.
Look how the universe brought our sparks together. Wow. I love it. I guess that's it. We hope that this put another bunch of sparks in your file. If there's a spark you'd like us to explore, or if you've taken a spark and fanned it into a creative flame and you'd like to share that, won't you email us at thesparkfile@gmail.com or submit it through our website, thesparkfile.com.
We will even happily take your feedback, but you know the price of admission. First, you have to share a creative risk that you have taken recently.
And be sure to subscribe to this podcast wherever you get your podcasts. Subscribe, rate, 5-star review it. If you like this podcast, share it with people that you love. If you didn't like it, I think you're crazy. I fucking love this Was the profanity the problem? Oh, fuck. Oh, sorry. Oh, fuck.
If something tickles your fancy and gets your creative juices flowing, we're writing you a forever permission slip to make that thing that's been knocking at your door. It's your turn to take a spark and fan it into a flame.
You got to bind it. You got to hand-lettered signed it. You got to do like Angelica Schuyler and rewind it.
That's awesome. You got to take it and make it. Bye.
Bye.
What that was.
When I bump into something that inspires me, I dump it in my spark file. Could be something that I want to make or how I want to be. I pump it in my spark file. I jump into my spark file. Let's open up the spark file.
Hi, friends. Susan Blackwell from the Spark File here to let you know that the doors are open for the Spark File Illume, a 9-month group creativity coaching mastermind that invites you to be the Chief Creative Officer and Chief Marketing Officer of your creativity. But what does that mean? That means in 9 months in Illume, you will clarify and advance your big creative goals and learn how to effectively share your work with the world. Now, if you're listening to this and you're an experienced creative or an accomplished professional who seeks a space where it is safe to attempt something you've never tried before, or complete a big creative project, or take your work to the next level and acquire the skills needed to share your creative work with the world, Illume might be right for you. We are calling in emotionally intelligent, high-functioning creatives who are ready to level up. You can find out more by going to thesparkfile.com/Illume, but do it now to find out if Illume is right for you and to save with early bird discounts. That's thesparkfile.com/Illume. Take a leap, take a risk. Go to thesparkfile.com/Illume and join us for Illume.